if you need a little break from all the horrible human beings we talk about on this program, this is the segment for you. And yes, it is exactly what the title says it is. Random Rabid Otter Attacks. I should say this, Florida man. Just because it makes it always better when it's a Florida man. And it is. It was
yeah, it does.
Unexpected and alarming event last week. Joseph Scaglione and a neighborhood dog found themselves in the jaws of a rabid otter in Jupiter, Florida. The incident.
I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
I always think of them as like these cuddly, cute creatures. I like to see them at the zoo because they look like they're having fun swimming, and they're just something that like I don't fear. Now I guess I should.
But let's preface it. Any animal that is rabid is going to become ferocious. Even a rabid sloth could, be potentially hazardous.
Every rabid animal I've ever encountered in my life has been kind of like a zombie. Not really the fast zombie of like Shaun of the Dead or anything like that. More like the Walking Dead type, where it's just kind of like...
That's pretty accurate, actually. I mean, it's an inflammation of the brain and the spinal cord. So if you think about, that's where your thinking comes from. So you can no longer really think, but you're still existing and trying to survive. Yeah. And that's where they become crazed.
We had like some raccoons in the backyard every now and then that were rabid, and they'd be... they don't like water, or they do like water when you're having...
They don't. They become hydrophobic. They are afraid of water.
Yeah, because I remember there was one that was down by the water, like just hissing at the water. Like,
oh no!
Fuck you, water! And this very scraggly looking raccoon, and then you could tell he was foam. I mean, it was sad. I remember my dad went out there and to put him out of his misery with the shotgun. There was another one, I think, that was up by the house. I remember that. There was a bat that was in our yard that was just sitting there that was pretty creepy. And I have a good one for the very end of all this. I have another rabies story. I have far more rabies stories than I really should have. Anyway, Joseph Scaglione, while feeding ducks in his backyard, was taken by surprise when an otter leaped from a nearby pond and bit him multiple times. My pinky bore the brunt of the attack. I sustained 2 puncture wounds on it. I'm uncertain if the bite went right through, with one wound near the cuticle. Scaglione conveyed this to CBS Miami, who just happened to need a story about an otter attacking a man that morning. On the same day, a dog accompanied by its owners and their infant became the otter's next target in the vicinity. The community's swift response led to the otter being safely captured using a recycling bin. Sadly, the creature did test positive for rabies and was subsequently euthanized. Given the gravity of the situation, the Florida Department of Health for Palm Beach County felt it essential to notify the public, emphasizing the urgency to avoid wild and potentially feral animals and to promptly report any suspicious animal activity to the Animal Care Control Center. So, rabies. Let's talk about that for a little bit. In case you're wondering exactly what it's all about, it's a viral ailment predominantly transmitted by animals. Rabies can infect humans when they've bitten or scratched by an infected creature. See, this is Rabies Awareness Month that we need to get this out there for the rabies walk that we're going to have, the rabies fun run. A chilling fact about rabies, as highlighted by the Mayo Clinic, is a near non-existent of survivors once the disease manifests. The only recourse post-exposure is to receive immediate medical intervention, which usually involves a series of shots to counteract the infection. I do have a story of someone surviving rabies. We'll get to that in a minute. Although globally, domestic dogs are responsible for 99% of human rabies cases, such instances are infrequent in the U.S. The threat in the States more often stems from wild animals like bats and raccoons, which can spread the disease just with their saliva. The World Health Organization describes the symptoms of rabies as beginning with a fever and a burning sensation and escalating to a fatal inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. 2 primary forms of rabies exist, paralytic and furious. The latter can be particularly menacing, causing hallucinations, hydrophobia, and a fear of fresh air. Without swift intervention, death often follows within days. I didn't know there was 2 types of rabies, paralytic and furious. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it's a big deal in the animal world, and that's why most I would say, if all communities have legal requirements that if you have a domestic animal in your I guess, captivity, like a dog, cat, that kind of thing, even ferrets, they need to be vaccinated for rabies. And that's because we're trying to control the spread of rabies. We don't want it to be so prolific. And there's not a lot you can do about bats and raccoons, but I'll tell you what, your cat and dog and ferret, they need to be vaccinated.
I think we need more awareness campaigns for raccoons and animals outside. Put some signs up, maybe walk around, put pamphlets around so they can read it and understand the dangers of rabies. We don't seem to do that. Hydrophobia, the hallmark of rabies, manifests as a deep-seated dread of water. The symptom can be so overpowering that even attempting to sip water can trigger spasms in the infected person. A tragic case from 2018 detailed a 49-year-old man bitten by a dog who succumbed to rabies post-displaying hydrophobia despite an initial vaccine dose. U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention staunchly advise that any interaction, especially those involving bites or scratches from unfamiliar wild animals, mandates immediate consultation with healthcare professionals. An essential first aid measure involves thoroughly cleaning the wound with soap and water. For those exposed, the suggested treatment is the administration of the human rabies immune globulin, HRIG, an immediate protection, followed by 4 doses of the rabies vaccine over 2 weeks. These vaccines, per the CDC, are akin to the familiar flu or tetanus shots in terms of administration and discomfort. So there you go. Historically,
and now with the advent of more scientific vaccines and things like that, if somebody is bitten by something that has rabies, it's not these horrific shots that they used to be where they would put them in your abdomen and they were extremely painful. And I remember somebody telling me that they had to have 16 shots. It's not quite that bad.
Yeah.
You still have to have a series of them, but they're not as painful as they once were.
So
and most of the people I worked with at the vet clinic were actually vaccinated for rabies. I never got around to it.
Can you just why not get vaccinated ahead of time? Like, is there a reason people don't get vaccinated?
Yeah. First of all, it's painful.
Okay.
The vaccine itself is a painful, and I think you need, I want to say either 2 or 3.
Okay.
It's a series.
Yeah.
And they're very expensive.
Oh.
So unless you have exposure risk, they don't want you to get it. It's not necessary. Because how often are you bitten by something that could be rabid? But if you work in a veterinary clinic, the chances go up.
Yeah, no,
by quite a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. Historically, there have only been 44 reported otter attacks since 1875. That's from a Canadian study from 2016. Study goes on.
Those Canadian otters,
Those are the ones you got to look out for because, they get a little feisty, a little frisky sometimes, and you don't want it when they start looking at you in the eye and you start hearing the voices. They're trying to mind control you. It's a mind fuck. It's a total mind fuck.
Don't you know?
When
they're
they do
a little bit more rascally.
Oh my God. So these other rabies story that I have, because I'm just filled with random shit. The only known person to survive rabies after getting it and not getting the vaccine for several days is actually someone from Wisconsin. And it actually was someone who lived across the street from me when I was a little kid.
What?
Yeah. Last name is Geezy. I forget what I was friends with like her cousin. But survived it, is now living a normal life. I think there was some, side effects and stuff early on, trying to get through it. But I believe she's, living a normal life today. But yeah, survived getting caught. It was actually right down the road from my parents' house. It was, and it's a big area with big trees and all that. They were, from what I remember, she was outside. She was going to like chapel because it was a Catholic high school, and she was walking outside and saw this bat on the ground, picked it up.
Oh boy!
Got bit. Didn't know what to do with it, and then the symptoms started showing. Didn't tell anyone that she got bit. I mean, she was a kid at the time.
Yeah, and that's what kids do.
Yeah, and eventually, they rushed her in. They got the treatments, and it was, touch and go. But she's one of the only ever to survive that level of having rabies and then coming out of it.
It would be interesting to do a study on her because what probably happened is yes, her body reacted, but it started producing antibodies. Something in her body said, okay, we need to fight this. And instead of letting it overcome the body, we know how to fight it. So it would be interesting to take a look at her DNA and what was going on there, because that's pretty miraculous, because this is a fatal disease.
Maybe she has like maybe she has something in her blood that fights it off, that if we harvested her blood, we could stop everyone from ever getting rabies. She would just have to sacrifice herself. That's all. That's all.
Well, there are some people who have certain qualities within themselves, certain things in their blood where it's beneficial for them to be a donor. So that's not too far from the truth.
Yeah. Jenna Giese was her name. She looks like she had some kids and is living a pretty good life now. In 2004 is when this took place.
Wow.
In my hometown of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
That's amazing.
Bitten by a bat. Did not seek medical attention. 3 weeks later, she was rushed to the Children's Wisconsin Hospital, where doctors confirmed she had rabies. The doctors began an experimental treatment that included a cocktail of drugs that placed her in a coma to protect her brain and give her immune system time to fight the infection. She was released from the hospital virus-free after 75 days. First person to survive rabies without being vaccinated, ever.
Yeah, so they put her into a state where her body stopped fighting it and could actually recover.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So there you go.
First of all, those doctors, boy, were they on top of things, because to even check her, I wonder if she finally admitted I was bitten by a bat.
Oh, at some point she did. Yeah, she told the story, and that's how they figured it out. She picked it up
good. Because I was
the...
going to say, that's usually not on their radar to check for that.
Yeah, no, that was the story. But yeah, that was a very interesting one. There you go. You all learned a whole lot more about rabies than you ever thought you needed to today. But now it will come in handy when you get bit by a rabid possum.
You're locked into the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts, and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member, exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast, dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.